A former assistant to Sean Diddy Combs speaking out in a new interview with new allegations about wild parties and drug use.
This is the first time that I'm speaking about it. Something that I'll never forget, actually.
It's hard to imagine the glittering world of fame and fortune hiding shadows so dark, but every now and then cracks appear, revealing secrets far more sinister than anyone could have guessed. Sean Diddy Combs, the hip-hop mogul who built an empire on charm, charisma, and catchy beats, is now at the center of allegations that stretch beyond anything his fans or peers could have imagined. What's behind the carefully curated image of a man who calls himself Love? According to a former employee, the truth isn't just shocking, it's devastating.
Well, first of all, I can only imagine how sloppy Sean Combs was with evidence when he got busted with those 2 machine guns or 3 machine guns with the altered serial numbers. So I really don't trust Sean Combs or the people around him's ability to properly cover up anything. So I envision that you're going to see a trial, payments from his Amex for flights for people, straight payments directly from his company to people.
Philip Hines, Diddy's former assistant, recently stepped into the spotlight, his voice shaking but his tone determined as he shared his experience working for the man he once admired. Hines, who worked closely with Diddy between 2019 and 2021, described his time under the music mogul's thumb as nothing short of a nightmare. What started as a dream job, an opportunity to learn from one of the most influential figures in entertainment, quickly turned into a horror story that he says he's still struggling to recover from.
He was responsible for Diddy's day-to-day life, so he is able to provide a lot of information about what that life was like. He goes into detail on extensive use.
When Pines first entered Diddy's orbit, he wasn't just a fan of the music. He was enthralled by the larger-than-life persona Diddy had carefully crafted over decades. This was a man who had survived scandal, betrayal, and personal loss only to rise stronger each time. To someone like Pines, who was eager to learn the ropes of the industry, it was like stepping into a masterclass with the best in the business. Pines described Diddy as magnetic, charming one moment, intimidating the next, but always seeming like he was in control of everything around him. However, that control, Pines would soon learn, extended far beyond business. It wasn't long before the lines between professional and personal became disturbingly blurred. At first, it was little things. Late-night calls for errands that had nothing to do with work, cryptic requests to arrange private gatherings, and a growing expectation that Pines would be available 24/7, no matter the cost to his own mental or emotional well-being. But what Pines initially shrugged off as the quirks of a high-profile boss soon spiraled into something far more insidious. Pines recalls one of the first moments he felt truly uneasy. It was during an after-party at one of Diddy's residences, where the atmosphere had shifted from celebratory to something darker as the night wore on. Diddy, visibly more uninhibited than usual, began making cryptic comments about loyalty and trust. At first, Pines assumed it was just bravado, a man flexing his power in front of an audience, but then Diddy turned to him directly. "Loyalty means everything to me," he said, his words slurring slightly. "And I mean everything." Pines laughed nervously, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't a question, and it certainly didn't feel like a joke.
Filed in LA. And I know you said he explained all of the items that were involved in these Wild King nights. Did he mention who would participate as well?
A lot of them were unknown to him. He did mention that a lot of the women were very, very young as 20, not underage, but certainly young women.
What followed was a pattern that Pines says became disturbingly familiar. He describes Diddy as being obsessed with loyalty, almost to a paranoid degree. Pines claims that Diddy would constantly test those around him, setting up scenarios to see how far they were willing to go to prove their allegiance. The requests started small, almost laughable in hindsight. Pick up this item from a store an hour away, right now. Or cancel your plans tonight. I need you here. But over time, the stakes grew higher, the demands more invasive. One night, Pines says, everything came to a head. It was during one of Diddy's infamous private gatherings at his home. Pines had been summoned upstairs to help set the mood, as Diddy put it. Pines was used to these vague instructions by now. They usually involved arranging lighting, placing specific items on hand, and ensuring the atmosphere was exactly how Diddy wanted it. But this time was different. When Pines walked in, he immediately felt the tension in the room. Diddy, visibly intoxicated, turned to him with a look Pines describes as both expectant and predatory. "Prove your loyalty to me," Diddy said, his voice lower than usual. "Show me what you're made of."
A lot of times you'd have him with a younger female, and there's a power dynamic there. A more impressionable girl is easier to reel in. Consent is between the people that are engaging, and I wasn't there in these situations to understand the consent.
At first, Pines didn't understand. He froze, hoping he'd misheard or misunderstood the request. But Diddy pressed on, handing him an object and motioning toward one of the guests, a woman sitting on the couch who, Pines says, seemed just as dazed and unsure as he was. "Go ahead," Diddy urged. "Let's see it." Pines tried to protest, but Diddy wouldn't take no for an answer. "You want to be in my world, don't you? Then prove it." The pressure in the room was suffocating. Pine says he felt trapped, terrified of what might happen if he refused. He'd seen Diddy's temper before, how quickly it could flare up over the smallest perceived slight. And while he'd never been on the receiving end of it, he'd witnessed enough to know he didn't want to be. Pines claims he reluctantly complied, though every fiber of his being was screaming at him to leave. He describes the experience as surreal, like watching himself from outside his body. When it was over, he fled the room the moment Diddy looked away, feeling a mix of shame, confusion, and anger that he still struggles to put into words.
In the moment, it just felt like, what? Like, is this fun for him? Is this like a test?
In the days that followed, Pine says he buried the incident deep within himself, convincing himself it was a one-time thing, a line that wouldn't be crossed again, but the reality was far more complicated. Pines claims the incident marked a turning point, after which he felt increasingly used, manipulated, and dehumanized. He began to notice patterns in how Diddy treated those around him, how he seemed to derive pleasure from exerting control over others, pushing their boundaries just to see if he could. It wasn't about loyalty, Pines realized. It was about power. The alleged incident left Pines grappling with intense feelings of guilt and self-blame. He says he spent months questioning what he could have done differently, wondering if he could have stood up to Diddy without losing everything he'd worked so hard to build. But the more he reflected, the more he realized the extent to which Diddy's influence had warped his sense of agency. He has this way of making you feel like his world comes first, Pines said in an interview, even if it's at your expense.
Wait a minute. Say that again. Say that again. Back up. You're saying that there's tapes and they're being shopped?
Yes, there have been people already shopping.
We've heard about the tapes, but
yes.
The shopping thing is...
Yes, there already have been tapes leaking around Hollywood, being shopped around to individuals in Hollywood. But one particular person contacted me to shop a particular video they were in possession of.
For Pines, the decision to come forward wasn't easy. He says he wrestled with the fear of retaliation, both professionally and personally. Diddy wasn't just a powerful figure in the music industry. He was a cultural icon with connections that spanned far beyond entertainment. Speaking out felt like an impossible risk, but Pines says he ultimately decided he couldn't stay silent any longer. "I realized I wasn't just protecting myself," he explained. "I was protecting him too, and he doesn't deserve that." As Pines' allegations come to light, they're painting a chilling picture of a man who, for decades, has been one of the most celebrated figures in pop culture. And while Diddy has categorically denied all accusations against him, the growing number of voices speaking out raises questions that are impossible to ignore. How deep does this go? And how many others, like Pines, have stories they've been too afraid to tell? This is where the story takes an even darker turn. Pines' claims aren't just shocking in isolation. They're part of a much larger narrative that's been unfolding around Diddy for years. From high-profile lawsuits to whispered rumors of behind-the-scenes misconduct, the allegations against him are beginning to form a pattern too consistent to dismiss. Could Pines' story be the key to unlocking the truth about one of the entertainment industry's most powerful players? And what does it mean for the empire Diddy has spent decades building? Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning.
It sounds like there was probably a lot of hidden cameras as well. Is that what is being talked about?
Yes, this was actually in his Atlanta home, at a home he had in Atlanta at one point. And it does seem that the person isn't like looking into the video, so it's, to me, doesn't seem like that person knows they're being videotaped. It doesn't seem like they're active participant in the videotaping.
It's almost impossible to ignore the growing storm of allegations surrounding Sean Diddy Combs, a man once considered untouchable in the world of entertainment. The charismatic mogul who built an empire of music, fashion, and luxury is now facing claims that seem to peel away the layers of his carefully constructed image. And what makes this even more disturbing is how his accusers' stories seem to echo one another, revealing a pattern of control, manipulation, and alleged abuse that spans decades. Philip Pines' allegations are just the tip of the iceberg. His shocking account of being coerced into compromising situations while working as Diddy's assistant fits into a larger narrative that has been building for years. Diddy's name has repeatedly surfaced in lawsuits and exposes, each one painting a more damning picture than the last. These stories are not isolated incidents. They're pieces of a puzzle that, when put together, seem to reveal a man obsessed with power and control, not just in his professional dealings, but also in his personal relationships.
And then the time frame is important because This happened in hotels, in places that have surveillance, that there's records that could be consistent with his testimony about when he alleges that these parties took place. He probably has his own information about who attended the events. When you're somebody like Sean Combs and you're such a celebrity and you're engaged in this type of behavior, people around you are memorializing it's.
Take Cassie Ventura, for example, who filed a civil suit against Diddy in late 2023. Cassie's lawsuit sent shockwaves through the industry, not only because of her startling claims, but because of how long she had remained silent. For years, she stood by Diddy's side, appearing in public as the glamorous partner of one of the most influential men in music. But behind closed doors, she alleged things were far from picture perfect. Cassie accused Diddy of orchestrating a deeply toxic relationship, one where she felt trapped and powerless. She claimed he would use extreme intimidation tactics and even surveillance to maintain control over her. Though the case was quickly settled, her decision to speak out seemed to open the floodgates for others to come forward.
If they did in fact occur, their argument is more than likely going to be that this activity was consensual, that this person was a willing participant, and not only that, but that these individuals assumed the risk of being present at those parties, of engaging and voluntarily engaging in this conduct and being in those spaces, consuming and things of that nature.
And come forward they did. Within weeks of Cassie filing her case, multiple other lawsuits surfaced, each one alleging behavior eerily similar to what Cassie described. Joey Dickerson Neal accused Diddy of misconduct dating back to the early 1990s when she was still in college. An anonymous woman identified only as Jane Doe claimed she was subjected to horrifying treatment in 2008. And in early 2024, music producer Rodney Lil Rod Jones filed a lawsuit alleging that he had firsthand knowledge of Diddy's troubling behavior, claiming he had witnessed and experienced actions that left him deeply scarred. What's particularly unsettling is how these lawsuits all seem to describe a man who operates with impunity, believing himself to be above the rules that govern everyone else. A recurring theme in these allegations is Diddy's alleged ability to manipulate those around him, using his wealth, power, and influence to bend people to his will. It's not just his employees or romantic partners who say they were targeted. Stories have emerged from people who barely knew him, claiming they were swept up in his world and left reeling from the experience.
This is somebody that actually thought that he was above the law. So I can only, think that, he was sloppy in the way that he did these crimes, that there's probably a trail of evidence, not only involving him, but everybody in his circle that he would, delegate these responsibilities to.
One of the most chilling accounts comes from Nathan, a man who worked as a high-end companion and claims to have been summoned to some of Diddy's infamous private gatherings. Nathan described these events as elaborate and carefully staged, with Diddy allegedly orchestrating every detail. According to Nathan, everything was designed to feed Diddy's insatiable appetite for control, from the lighting in the room to the exact positioning of the people present. Nathan also alleged that Diddy seemed to thrive on pushing boundaries, often testing how far he could go before someone pushed back. And when they didn't, it only seemed to embolden him further.
Everyone keeps saying to me, like, how did you keep, why did you keep going? Why were you there? I'm like, it literally is around me. If I don't stay at home, this is the atmosphere I'm in. Like, I have no choice.
The allegations of control extend beyond just personal relationships. Multiple lawsuits allege that Diddy used his business empire as a way to dominate and intimidate those around him. Employees have come forward with claims of being forced into morally compromising situations, while others have described an environment where fear and loyalty were the only currencies that mattered. Philip Pine's account of being tasked with cleaning up after Diddy's chaotic private events adds weight to these allegations. According to Pines, the aftermath of these events often included more than just physical messes. It left emotional scars on those who were forced to participate. Even beyond the walls of his home, Diddy's alleged behavior has been called into question. Reports from his extravagant vacations and high-profile parties paint a picture of a man who viewed the world as his playground, with little regard for the consequences. In one particularly troubling incident, a staff member on a charter yacht claimed that the atmosphere on board was anything but celebratory. Instead, it was described as chaotic and unsettling, with guests allegedly pressured into situations that left them shaken. This account fits with other stories of Diddy's larger-than-life gatherings, which were often shrouded in secrecy but rumored to include behavior that many would consider deeply inappropriate.
I feel like we're almost becoming numb to the lawsuit after the lawsuit after the lawsuit. And do all of the allegations against Combs so far that we've seen make the claims here, these new claims, do you think it makes it more or less true? In other words,
and then there's the infamous video footage from 2016, which resurfaced in mid-2024 and appeared to show Diddy physically confronting Cassie in a hotel hallway, while his legal team has tried to downplay the footage, calling it a moment of poor judgment. It's hard to ignore how it aligns with the broader allegations against him. For many, the video served as visual confirmation of what Diddy's accusers had long been claiming, that behind the glitz and glamour, there was a darker reality.
Is everybody familiar with the old Houdini? So what Diddy's lawyers are trying to do is pull a Houdini. They're trying to say that the evidence that they have is different. Well, it's not different. The video that the entire world has seen is not going to go away. The fact that he had parties that were freak-offs is not going away. So it's just a question of whether or not Diddy is able to make bond.
Diddy's defense team has repeatedly denied all allegations, framing the lawsuits as opportunistic attempts to exploit his fame and fortune. His lawyers have gone to great lengths to discredit his accusers, citing inconsistencies in their stories or suggesting ulterior motives. But for every denial, a new claim seems to surface, adding to the growing chorus of voices calling for accountability. And as the legal battles continue to unfold, the question remains, how much longer can Diddy maintain his innocence in the court of public opinion? The fallout from these allegations has already begun to impact Diddy's empire. Deals that once seemed untouchable have reportedly been put on hold, and some of his longtime collaborators have distanced themselves from the mogul. Even his family hasn't been spared from scrutiny. His sons, who have often appeared as extensions of his brand, have faced questions about their own involvement in his business dealings. It's a stark contrast to the image Diddy once projected of a tight-knit family united by love and loyalty. What makes this even more complicated is the cultural significance of Diddy's career. For decades, he has been a symbol of success, resilience, and reinvention. He's the man who turned Bad Boy Records into a powerhouse, who helped shape the career of artists like the notorious B.I.G., and who built a personal brand that extended far beyond music. To many, he represents the ultimate rags to riches story, a testament to what can be achieved through determination and vision. But as these allegations continue to mount, they threaten to overshadow everything he's built, forcing fans and industry insiders alike to reckon with the possibility that the man they admired may not be the person they thought he was.
I'm not surprised with the decision. I'm surprised that Judge Subramanian entertained it. He held a 2-hour hearing, which we were covering live, and he issued a 5-page written order. Most other judges, including the 2 previous judges, to consider this issue, summarily denied the bail motion. I think a lot of it stems from Judge Subramanian being a newer judge. This is a Biden appointee.
The parallels between Diddy's current legal troubles and those faced by other high-profile figures in recent years are impossible to ignore. From the downfall of Harvey Weinstein to the reckoning faced by R. Kelly, we've seen how the tides can turn when enough voices come together to challenge the status quo. In each of these cases, it wasn't just the allegations themselves that brought these men down. It was the broader cultural shift that demanded accountability, no matter how powerful or untouchable someone seemed. Could Diddy be next? And if so, what does that mean for the legacy he's spent decades crafting? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more celebrity gossip and updates on this unfolding drama. Until next time, stay curious,